Welcome to this little interview. I have Joe Barnard with me. Joe is going to be one of the speakers at the Edinburgh Convention this year, 2021. He will be speaking on Sunday night, Monday night, and Tuesday night. And this interview is just a little get to know you time with Joe. So, Joe, I've talked to you. No one has talked to you, heard you yet on this interview, but I know that your accent isn't very Scottish. So where are you from? Can you tell us a little bit about your background?
From the United States. I was born in Dallas, Texas, but really grew up outside New Orleans. So kind of the deep South. That's home for me.
Very good. So how did you become a Christian? Were you brought up in a Christian family, or how did all of that, how did the Lord break into your life, if I could put it like that?
You know, there's kind of two layers. I grew up with a mom who was really a woman of prayer, a woman of faith. So some of my earliest memories are just seeing her pray and seeing God respond. And so from early on, I had a real sense of God's fatherhood, his protection, his provision for us. It was high school. That's often when God begins to show us more of our own heart. I think that's when I began to realize I was a sinner in need of grace. And so really late high school, God opened my eyes and really professed faith and began a more earnest life of pursuing him.
Very good. Are you a single guy, married guy? Can you tell us a bit about your family?
No, if you listen carefully, you'll probably hear rumbling, from above. I've got 4 children, so sometimes it sounds like a herd of elephants above me. So married, my wife's name is Anna, wonderful, wonderful woman. So grateful for her. And we have 4 children. So oldest is 13, youngest is right now 6. So kind of in those middle years, not yet all in the teenage, but not having babies either. So.
Very good. And so you're now a minister of a church. How did you feel or sense the call of God into ministry?
That really began after the Lord had really done a work in my life at late high school. Ended up taking a gap year and studying the north of Scotland in Dingwall. And anybody who knows Dingwall knows there's not a lot up there. And so what there is a lot of space, a lot of open, quiet hills to walk on. And it was really that year, that gap year, where as I studied at Highland Theological College, I also just began to feel a sense of a desire for ministry. And so early 20s, there were other things that distracted me here and there, but really through that time, more and more God was crystallizing this sense of a burden to be a pastor. And so eventually that led me back to Scotland.
So you studied at Dingwall, did the year out gap year, and then did you study elsewhere, or did you graduate from HTC, or?
Yeah, so it's interesting. For me, all roads seem to lead back to Scotland. So I spent a year in Scotland, but then afterward went back to the States, studied at university in Texas, met my wife there, interned with a church for several years while working on the side. And then finally was looking to do a master's degree. So came back to Scotland to St. Andrews to do that. And it was while I was studying that I found out about a little church in the Highlands that was in need of a pastor. And so ended up moving up to the Highlands with my family and spending more time in Scotland. So that was my second time here.
So what was the name of the church, and tell us a little bit about your time there?
So Kiltarlity Free Church. Kiltarlity is a small village about 12 miles outside of Inverness. And it was just a small elderly church that they weren't in a position to have a real pastor. And so they were looking for some sort of student that would be willing to preach. And since I wasn't ordained, it was a great fit. So we went up there and spent about 8 years just doing that revitalization work. And it was a great time, great to see that church begin to blossom and gain new life and be firmly established. So it was a wonderful time there.
Very good. And then you finished up, was that 2018 you finished in Kiltarlity? And what have you done since that time?
Yeah, so we left Kiltarlity. They were at a good transition point. And so went back to the States and spent the last 3 years, building up a men's discipleship ministry. And that largely came out of me, one, just seeing the lack of mature men in most churches, but also as I was spending more time discipling men as a pastor, struggling because it was almost like I couldn't give them enough, even if I was preaching, even if I was meeting weekly. And so went back to try to think about, what is it that men really need to be able to set them up to be able to mature and become the men that they need to become. And so started Cross Train Ministries and did that full time for the last 3 years. And then just recently moved back to Edinburgh. This is my third time in Scotland, and to pastor, but also to carry forth that work too.
Very good. So now you're minister of Holyrood Evangelical Church. And when did you arrive back in Scotland?
Just 2 months ago.
Wow.
So we've just arrived pretty much, but it's wonderful to be back here.
Well, Joe, we're really looking forward to your ministry at the convention, and thanks for taking the time to share with us a little bit about your story, your background, how the Lord has been at work in your life this morning, and maybe closer to the time we'll catch up a little bit with you one more time and just hear about what you might be speaking on, if that's okay.
Sounds great.